So hey guys, it's Tamara. I'm actually in one of the rest stops in North Carolina. I just wanted to add some updates for you as well while I'm here, because I'm on my way back out, and I'll try to get some video of how beautiful this place is. It is gorgeous. I'm coming from my keynote, and I wasn't able to get it on film. I am so depressed by that. One of the reasons I wasn't able to get it on film was my cell phone, right like 5 minutes before I went on, and there were like cameras everywhere and people were like trying to talk to me, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know how celebrities do this. I'm gonna have a nervous breakdown. And right at that moment, my phone just stopped working. I had been sitting around a pool, and I'm gonna post a picture of that pool. I wasn't in, I was just sitting there, and I was getting some R&R, and I was trying to prepare for my keynote, and next thing I know, my phone completely goes dead. It dies, it cuts off, and like my screen is flickering, and my mom's like, oh my God, I think the humidity out here in Atlanta, Georgia is what killed your phone. And so I wasn't able to get anything from my phone. My phone died because we had to do a lot of GPS travel. I mean, it was a mess. And I was literally on the verge of tears for several reasons. But the most important reason is I wanted to get that for you guys so badly. So when I get back to Pennsylvania, I think that I'm going to try to do a video, go back to my office, do a video, and I will actually read my keynote to you as if you are my keynote audience. I just feel so bad that I could not get that on tape. It was a once in a lifetime kind of an opportunity, and it was so beautiful, and it had to be over 200 people there in a beautiful ballroom, and I'm just hurt that I couldn't get that on tape, but I will definitely read it to you. But I'm gonna actually show you a couple things at this rest stop in North Carolina. It is so pretty, so I'm gonna show it to you. I'm gonna walk around the back, and then I'm gonna show you what it looks like around the front. So here we go. All right, here we go. It's so beautiful here. Obviously somewhere where you can kind of sit.
Head west toward US 23 South, US 74 West.
So hey guys, it's Tamara. I actually snuck away into the bathroom just to touch base with you guys. So now I'm in Tennessee. We're in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and it's amazing here. I mean, honestly, if I wanted to go to the country and live, I would come to Tennessee. That's so true. I came in and some lady was like, oh my God, you're doing the bridge, the Gap Symposium, because I forgot to take this off, guys. I really did. It's crazy, but I forgot to take it off. I wanted to stop in and just kind of update you, let you see where I am. I'm in Chattanooga, so if I can get some scenery, something cool on camera, I will. But I am exhausted, guys. I didn't realize road trips was this hard. We took them years ago as a family, and I was much younger. I was not over 34. Oh my God. So I'm gonna go get back in the car. I'm gonna take the wheel and do about 7 hours driving, hopefully. And then if we see something else cool, my mom and I, if we see anything else cool, or I could get something on camera, I will do that for you. But love Tennessee. So far, so good. All right. Hey guys, it is Tamara. Today I'm going to do a little bit of a voiceover, and I want to add some photos and a few videos from my trip to the National Board for Certified Counselors Bridging the Gap Symposium. I did a keynote speech there for the event to kind of jumpstart it and get it going. And I think I've said this a million times, but it was a complete honor. And I'm so humbled by the experience. The only issue that I had was with my phone. I had lost some of the video that had happened, during and throughout my whole 3-day stay. And sadly, I lost the most important part of that, which was my keynote speech, because my phone completely died. I don't know what happened to it. I think the humidity from being in an enclosed forest-like pool setting, something happened where I think the humidity built up in my phone like water. And the next day I woke up and it was in a pool of water. Like, it was on the side of my bed and it was in a pool of water, and I was just completely hurt because my screen was flickering. I mean, it was a mess. So I'm so hurt by that I couldn't keep that most memorable piece of everything and share it with you. So I'm going to share a little bit of my speech with you today, just so that you can hear what it was. We have Memorial Day, which is Monday. It is today. And Memorial Day for me is not just my birthday, but it is also a recognition of everything that has happened to us in this nation. And, my keynote presentation was about that. It was about intergenerational trauma in families, and I extended that to also include culture. And intergenerational trauma from a cultural and historical perspective is something that I think we need to focus on today for Memorial Day. So when we look back over our brief history, we have civil rights movements after slavery, and the most, I think, brutal civil rights time was between 1954 and 1968. We also had, so many years prior to that, we had the Indian Removal Act, and that was signed into law by President Andrew Jackson at the time. And over 15,000 Native Americans and Indians were forced to remove themselves from the land from where they had been stationed for a very long time. And that was one of the deadliest removals, and I mean removal in quotation marks, of our time. Because so many Indians and Native Americans died, and a lot died against their will. And oh my God, they were told to walk at gunpoint and leave the area where they were, and it was very bloody. And so there's a trail in Georgia called the Trail of Tears. I'm going to post a video in the description box below so that you can see that. If you want to learn a little bit more about that. But then, in 1933, we had Auschwitz concentration camps. One of my favorite existential psychotherapists was Viktor Frankl. He was a logotherapist, and he was also a trauma survivor. And he was kept in a concentration camp for years. He saw brutal murders. He, had to deal with the loss of family members. He dealt with a lot of trauma. And when he came out of there, he emerged from there. He was a brand new man. And so he wrote the book, Man's Search for Meaning. Man's Search for Meaning. And so if you haven't gotten that book, I encourage you to get that for yourself. But then, let's rewind to the 20th century. We had anti-Italian discrimination toward Italian immigrants. We also had hostility and prejudice against the Jewish community with hate crimes. And we can go all the way back to 2012 and much further than that in regards to that. And today's immigration laws, fights and battles, police brutality, all of that. These are all of the things that we need to talk about during Memorial Day. And so when I had gotten up on stage there, I looked upon about over what looked like to be about 150, 200 people. And I looked at them and I thought to myself, we need to focus on forgiveness. This needs to be our Memorial Day message, the message of forgiveness. You know, my grandmother, she's so religious, guys. She's overly religious almost. And she goes to church every Sunday. She doesn't miss out on any Wednesday night, Thursday night, or Saturday sermons. You know, she's that kind of person. She dresses really prim and proper, really neat. And I told her I was going to utilize her famous message to all of her family members and her grandchildren, which is, you got to forgive, you got to forgive. And I told her I would utilize that for the keynote presentation. And she was like, oh, shh. And I said, did you just curse? Right? We don't expect religious people to curse, and especially when they're elderly. And she's like, you got to forgive, you got to forgive, you got to forgive. And I'm like, oh, wow, that is such a twist of psychology right there. It's not funny. And so I had shared that story during the keynote, and it seemed to be amusing to many. But the whole point of sharing that story was that even though she's annoying, and even though she's overly religious, and even though she cursed, and she totally disregarded her religion by doing so, so freely, like it was nothing, the important piece of the puzzle is that she's right about forgiveness, that we have to forgive. And so when we think of family trauma, we think of cultural trauma, we have to understand that forgiveness is a part of healing. It's a part of the post-traumatic growth stage. You know, even after all of the trauma that was experienced culturally by different ethnic minorities and individuals within the nation, across the nation, outside of the nation, you know, even though those battles slightly resided and kind of diminished, right? The battle did not end. The residual effects of what that cultural trauma did was seeped into communities and into the hearts and the soul of those who had experienced it. And that in and of itself is very traumatizing. It's really hard to imagine, right, how traumatizing that could actually be. But it's important to understand that the external pressures of cultural trauma are internalized, right? And that is causing trauma throughout generations. It really does decay the mind, the heart, and the soul. Learned helplessness, racial battle fatigue, low self-esteem, post-traumatic stress, self-fulfilling prophecies, etc. All of that results, right, from those external pressures. You know, it impacts how individuals function. And when it impacts how individuals function, it also impacts how those individuals function within their families. And as a result, the family becomes destabilized, right? Intergenerational trauma is the process by which generations struggle with unresolved psychological pain, with challenges paralleling a family curse. It's really brokenness, to say the least. And the foundation of intergenerational trauma is fear, lack of courage and uncertainty, intense emotion, psychological displacement, and imprisoning cognitive distortions, right? So thinking errors. So intergenerational trauma isn't easily rectified by counseling. It's not easily rectified by medication. Neither is it easily rectified by a Band-Aid, right? Time doesn't heal all wounds, and it certainly doesn't heal these wounds. And as a result, we have to be very sensitive to the needs and to the battled mind that individuals with intergenerational trauma, experience and have. Euro-based techniques or Eurocentric techniques in counseling miss the mark. Untreated trauma gets internalized, and medication only serves to deaden thought expression and submerge the pain, right? These wounds caused by external and internal battles prevent active searching of counseling and erodes trust. these wounds create a skewed perception. And when I talked about these skewed perceptions, I was talking about, how we see ourselves, and how people of color see themselves, and how people who experience intergenerational trauma in their own family see themselves, right? An example of that is the March for Life. That was a march that had occurred. I can't remember what state it was in, but Nathan Phillips was the Native American elder that had come face to face with a Caucasian young man who was in college, in high school. And, there was a lot of controversy about, well, who was right, who was wrong in that situation. And what I recognized after watching the tapes over and over, discussing it and so forth, I study intergenerational trauma for a living. So, my research is trying to figure out, well, what happened there? And what I noticed was that, Nathan Phillips really had almost like post-traumatic stress disorder flashbacks. He's standing in front of this Caucasian kid who seems really kind of smug, and at the moment his perception is reality, and he's perceiving an attack on his race, and it's like this mindset of, here we go again. It's like post-traumatic stress disorder flashbacks, right? It goes in, or it comes in and it goes out, right? And so you have to imagine individuals who have post-traumatic stress disorder, and you may be one of them, they're constantly on guard, they're hypervigilant, and so Nathan Phillips was a prime example of that hypervigilance. The other incident that I mentioned during the keynote speech was that of Antoine Rose in Pennsylvania. And Antoine Rose was a young teenager. He had been at the wrong place at the wrong time. And one of the things that he did, he was in an Uber or a moving vehicle with someone who had did a drive-by shooting, took advantage of that situation. And he did the drive-by shooting, and Antoine Rose took a dash for it. He started running. He was panicked. He was fearful. And when the police were called, he got even more afraid, and so he ran. And so the police said, stop, and the kid did not stop. You have to imagine, police are intimidating to adults, much less kids who are at the wrong place at the wrong time. And he shot him in the back 4 times. And, my city was in uproar because of that. It was just a protest, and the list goes on after the not guilty verdict. And, I must say that there was a lot of misinformation about this event. And one perception was someone on a radio show who is pretty well known as a journalist in Pennsylvania said, why is it that when black on black crime happens, nobody's upset, but when something like this happens, an Antoine Rose situation happens, everybody is upset? And I never got a chance to call that station and correct his perspective, but I will say it to you guys, and I said it during my keynote speech as well, that with black on black crime, it's not historical trauma based. It's not. It is not something that stems from prejudice and racism and discrimination and a lot of fear and a lot of fear mongering and a lot of bloodshed and a lot of imprisonment. Black on black crime does not necessarily stem from that intergenerational trauma, but white on black crime does, and white on black brutality does. And so that's what's really difficult about that. We have to understand, again, that we are dealing with a culture of people of color, of all colors, have experienced some kind of trauma in their history because of the color of their skin, because of what they believe in, because of their Italian heritage, their German heritage, their Native American heritage, their African American heritage, their Asian heritage, their Japanese heritage, whatever it is. There's always been an attack on ethnic minorities as a whole, and we have that trauma. And so when something like this happens, it just triggers that trauma once again, and it becomes like deja vu, and so we have to be mindful of that. Perception is reality, and I say this all the time. And so when imprisonment and trauma is your perception, and that is reality for you, you retreat, and then you suffer silently, right? All of that pain gets internalized, and so unresolved emotional pain turns into self-hatred and anger and and depression and hopelessness. And this is a downward spiral, oftentimes to suicidal ideation, self-injurious behaviors, and other destructive patterns. We also have a lot of interpersonal and intrapersonal challenges, right? We have a lot of those challenges within families who are struggling with intergenerational trauma, primarily those of color. Marriage fails, parenting is poor, employment is difficult to get, right? We have education that's hard to get, and we also have future goal development that is completely discouraged. So, intergenerational trauma is an insidious poison. It's a poison that further erodes the family of people of color and those who have experienced intergenerational trauma. In really unstable, emotionally and psychologically families, in those unstable families, we have a phenomenon known as traumatic bonding. And traumatic bonding is when you have an authority figure, your parent, your grandparent, somebody that has raised you, loved you, and they alternate between a loving, good person and a very abusive, traumatizing person. And you begin to bond with them and stand up for them and make excuses for them despite everything they've done to you. So if you were sexually abused by your dad, instead of you getting angry because he sexually abused you, you'll say something like, well, he just needed love at that time. He was very lonely. You will make excuses for the trauma that he has put you through. And so traumatic bonding happens, and that leads to an even further imprisonment of the mind and the heart of that individual. So that compounds intergenerational trauma. And so when it's difficult to marry the idea that you have a loved one in your family that is both hateful and abusive and then loving and caring sometimes, you experience what's known as cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is not being able to hold two opposing theories in your mind at the same time, and so you drop one in favor of the other. And that's the scary part, right? Traumatic bonding is really cognitive dissonance. It's dropping the abusive individual that you see, that character, and you're going to just accept them for the good that they are. And that's the hard part, right? So then after you go through all of this, you a lot of what you do is you look for survival techniques, and a lot of those arise out of your need to survive and to preserve your generation and who you are as a person. So survival techniques pop up, and that's an overly content attitude, right? If I can't beat it, might as well join it. That's the kind of attitude. Substance abuse, unrelentless pleasure seeking, right? Drug abuse, sexual promiscuity, all of that. Internalization of unresolved emotions, right? You just don't talk about it. Let's keep it down there. We're going to leave it there and everything will be fine, right? So these survival tactics, which there's tons of them, they backfire. They really do backfire. And so, in my own family, I've had my own intergenerational trauma because my family, although they're very educated and beautiful and talented people, we have a long history of intergenerational trauma stemming from decades back. I have both Native American and African American, and I should add German roots as well. So all of my cultures within my family experience some kind of prejudice and discrimination, some kind of intergenerational trauma. And so from both personal and professional experience, I recognize that instead of giving into attachment trauma and parent-child conflict and post-traumatic stress and unresolved psychological pain and low self-esteem and fear, instead of giving into that, I decided with the love of my mom, with my faith, with my belief in God, with my passion to heal those who are hurting, with my career passion, with my dedication, and with my heart that wants to love other people, I decided to say no to intergenerational trauma. There's many avenues and detours we can take that determines our destiny. And I think that if we choose forgiveness, if we choose strength, if we choose courage, we can survive this, right? We have to forgive. Remember, the foundation of my keynote was forgiveness. And I encouraged everybody in the room there to forgive the destructive seeds within their families, forgive their own behaviors and beliefs, forgive their own historical and cultural pain, right? I also said that once you forgive, these are stepping stones into the future. And the stepping stones, courage, strength, and psychological strategy around marginalization. Those are stepping stones. Those are stepping stones. Throughout this whole entire speech, I saw that everybody was very quiet and they were attentive. And I ended my speech by saying this. Logotherapist and trauma survival Viktor Frankl once said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, right? Change our history, it's already done. Change the pain, it's already there. Change the wounds, they're already there. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Thank you so much, guys, for listening to this video today. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Share it with someone that it may help or heal. And let me know what you think in the comment section below. Bye-bye.